Hi, I'm Tracy Soffra and this is the Women of Wealth podcast. So picture this. You just received or you've saved $20,000. What to do with that sum of money? You could spend it on a luxury holiday or a car, or you could invest it wisely to set yourself up for the future. So let's talk about the best way to invest this 20 grand. And this is really a common question that I have had over the years when I've been advising clients. I often get, Trace, I've got 50 grand or I've got 20 grand. In this case, we're talking about 20 grand. What should I do with it? Well, the very first question I always ask is, what are the purpose of the funds? And what that does is that then gives us a time frame in which we're working. Yeah. So what I'm going to talk about today is investing according to short term and then investing according to long term. And that will determine how we actually, or what we actually do with the funds when we're talking about investing it. Sure, you can use a little bit of it for a bit of a holiday, a bit of a treat, but remembering this, your future self will thank you for it if you do the right thing with that money. So let's discuss the different investment strategies that will suit the varying financial goals and the investments required based on that time horizon. So I'm going to jump straight in to short-term investments. And so with short-term strategies, what they are designed to pretty much talk about when we say short term, it's, 12 months to 2 years. That's pretty much short term when you're thinking of a time frame of what that actually means. And it's a great option to be able to park that money in the best possible place because it is short term. So if you're going to need those funds in 12 months to 2 years, you don't really want to be exposing that to market fluctuations, and definitely not, 20 grand won't buy you a property, but any amount of money, we're talking about 20 today, but any amount of money that has a short-term time frame, you don't want to be putting it into a direct property, which there's high costs of entry. The biggest cost you'll have is stamp duty on purchase, and also the high cost of exiting, which is the agent's commissions, which is anywhere between 2.5 to 3.3 of the sale price. So, and then shares, investing in shares or growth type assets, they need long-term to actually give you what you're looking for. So we'll talk about them in a minute, but 12 months to 2 years, what's the best strategy? Well, really two things: high yielding cash account or bank account. And at the moment, interest rates are really, really good for high interest rate savings accounts, or you can use a term deposit. Term deposits are also really, really good, and you should get a higher rate of interest on term deposits simply because that's where you lock your money away for either 3 months, 6 months, 12 months and the like. So let's dive right in and let's have a look at what the differences are between a high yielding savings account and a term deposit. So if you're looking for a safe and straightforward way to invest, high-yielding savings accounts are always great and a great way to go. So unlike market options or other investments, there's no risk in terms of your 20 grand going up and down. And the federal government, by the way, guarantees up to $250,000 for each deposit per ownership per category of insured accounts. So you could have 250 in two different bank accounts, and each of those 250s would be guaranteed by the government. So again, it's really securing that 20,000. It doesn't move. Your 20,000 doesn't grow, but it doesn't go down either. And you simply receive what we call the yield on that investment. The yield is the interest return. Yeah. And so with high yielding accounts, they're short term, they secure your capital, they give you a good rate of return, and at the end of the 12 months, 2 years, you can grab it, plus the money that it's made, and away you go with whatever purpose you want to use those funds for. Term deposits are a little bit different. They offer also a safe and a low risk investment option with a guaranteed return. And term deposits typically offer a set of interest rates for a particular period, as I mentioned. So high interest bearing bank accounts, you can just park it there for the next 12 months to 2 years, and then just keep reinvesting the interest or taking the interest if you need the income. But with term deposits, you've actually got to lock it away for either 6 months, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. Some banks offer 2 years. And for you foregoing it for that period of time, they'll give you a higher interest rate to do that. There may be some break costs. Well, there definitely will be break costs if you do break that contract of the term deposit and you want to pull your capital out earlier. You won't get the full term of the interest. Just a little side note to remember with that. But term deposits offer high interest rates and as I mentioned, higher than your high interest savings accounts. And there's no volatility in that. Basically, you're parking it, getting it working for you, and then taking it out and using it for whatever you want to use it for. So the time frame is what you want to be considering, because every single investment type, so what are they? Cash, fixed interest, property, and shares. They all have different requirements to give you what you want in terms of a return. So cash and fixed interest, when we talk fixed interest, we're typically talking about term deposits and high interest rate accounts. They're great for short term, as I've just mentioned, that grow. Like that 20 grand won't be worth more than the 20 original grand in 12 months to 2 years. But if you take the long-term approach on that 20 grand, now we're talking about a whole different ballgame. So let me jump into that for a second and explain the differences. When your time frame goes for the long term, what's long term? 7 to 10 years, yeah? Different to 12 months to 2 years. All of a sudden we go, okay, well, that gives us enough time to be able to expose that 20 grand to property and shares. Now, it may not necessarily be enough, which it isn't, to buy a direct property, but you can certainly invest in REITs, which are real estate investment trusts, and definitely shares. And there's an array of different options that I'm going to quickly discuss with you today. But all of a sudden, by simply knowing that it's long-term, 7 to 10 years, you've got a better chance of growing that 20 grand to 30, 40 and the like over a 7 to 10 year time frame. That means you don't touch it. You don't respond to, market conditions. You don't panic. You don't start selling off. You're in for the long term. You ride the wave, so to speak, and you let it do its job, because property and shares are what we call growth assets. They will not only give you an income return, the value will grow over time, provided you have the long-term outlook for that particular investment. So let me talk to you about a few options, common examples of long-term investments. Well, one of the typical ones is superannuation, right? So you could pop that 20 grand into super. What would be the decisions that you'd need to look at and the factors you'd need to look at in that particular scenario? Okay, the biggest thing is really that super is preserved until such time as you can access it based on your age. Anyone born after the 1st of July 1964, super is accessible at the age of 60. So if you're 40, you're probably not going to want to chuck it all into super. Why? You've got 20 years before you can touch that. Now, I'm saying probably, but that depends on what other assets you have. And every single investment decision has to be made in context with your whole financial situation, right? So if you've got a heap of real estate, if you've got managed funds and an array of investments, and that 20 grand isn't really going to bother you tying it up in super for the next 20 years, great choice. But if you don't, you might want to consider leaving some of it out because you can't access your super. And if you need funds which are not in super over the next 20 years, you might want to think about ETFs, exchange traded funds, managed funds, and as I mentioned, properties and REITs. But again, we're talking about 20 grand here today. So with the 20 grand, super is definitely an option. Managed funds is a definite option. What are managed funds? Okay, so managed funds are institutions that offer you an array of investments that are managed by a team of people, and they're pretty much experts in their field, and they pool everyone's monies together. And depending on the portfolio that you've invested in, so if you've invested in, let's talk typical things like a balanced fund. A balanced fund means It varies, but let's say 50-50. Let's say 50-50 property and shares, and let's say 50-50 fixed interest and cash. So the fund manager will pull all of your monies with everybody else that invests in that particular investment, balanced share portfolio, let's say a balanced portfolio. They will invest roughly 50 in fixed interest and cash and 50 in property and shares. Yeah, they make the call on what to buy, when to sell, when to buy more, when to sell out. So it's managed, hence the word managed funds. It's managed by experts. It gives you great diversification because for $20,000, if you go into a managed fund, you're going to get exposure to property, shares, fixed interest and cash for 20 grand. You can't even get into direct property with 20 grand. So, and the amount of shares you can buy in a portfolio for 20 grand isn't going to be a lot. But through managed funds, you're probably going to get exposure to the ASX, which is the Australian Stock Exchange, say the top ASX 200 index, which is the top 200 shares in Australia, for as little as 20 grand, plus some REITs through property, plus some fixed interest, and plus a little bit of cash. So you can see the power in using 20 grand to invest in managed funds that is professionally managed for you by a fund manager and their team. You simply pop your money in, choose the portfolio. Your money is pooled with everybody else's monies who are in that portfolio. You are the owner of the units in that portfolio, and the greatest thing you can do with something like that is add to it every single month. It's called a savings plan, and it takes advantage of dollar cost averaging. What does that mean? Every single month your money goes in, you're buying at whether the market's high or the market's low, because no one can pick the market. So we're buying at highs and lows all the time, and that pretty much keeps the average of your purchase up and down on a more beneficial scale, and allows you not to pick the market, but allows you to buy at highs and lows over a long period of time. It has the benefit of compound as well as the dollar cost averaging. So it's brilliant. It's really a no-brainer. And if you can if that situation suits you and you pop your 20 grand in there and you allocate, say, $200 a month, set and forget, happy days. That over the next 20, if you are 40, over the next 20 years will grow exponentially and have a massive impact to the end result. And really, it's a simple, very simple type strategy. Managed funds are typically what we call actively managed. What that means is that the professional experts that are running that portfolio are making those calls of buying and selling and which way the portfolio is going to go. That also comes down to what we call, what's the type of manager are they? What type of manager are they? Are they a growth manager? Are they a value manager? They're probably the easiest ones for me to explain. What's a value manager when you talk about managed funds? Okay, so a value manager is someone that's going to invest in all of the companies that no matter what happens in the economy is going to make money. So who are they? Well, the four banks. You've got the mining companies, Rio and BHP. You've got Transurban, which are the tolls. You've got Origin. You've got Wesfarmers. You've got, just let me think of all the other ones. All the ones that no matter what happens in the economy, we've got to turn the lights on. Oh, Telstra. We've got to use the phones. We've got to go to the bank. We've got to buy the groceries. We've got to use the roads. Are you getting my drift? So that's what a value manager would invest in. No matter what happens in the economy, highs and lows, those particular assets are always going to be used, and that's what a value manager will invest in. A growth manager will be looking for the companies that are next best thing, next biggest thing, something that's going to take off. So when you're investing in managed funds, you're going to want a combination of those different types of managers. Again, why are we doing this? We're trying to diversify. And what does diversification do? Lowers the risk of volatility and allows you to keep a pretty even keel with your investments and therefore greater returns over the long term. So they're the types of managers that you can have in a managed fund, and that's why they're actively managed. Versus an ETF. So an ETF is an exchange-traded fund. Now, an exchange-traded fund is typically known for its passive management. Most exchange-traded funds, they always are pretty much tracking an index. They're flexible, they're easy, they're transparent, and they're cheap. because they're not actively managed. They always have the potential for capital appreciation. And the most important thing to know is that they are similar to a managed fund. However, they are traded on the stock exchange. So to go to a fund manager, you really have to either find one yourself or work with a planner. But an ETF is something you can buy on the ASX, just like you can buy a Telstra share or a Commonwealth Bank share or an ANZ share or anything else. So it is easy to trade on the stock exchange, and definitely, obviously, it provides you with diversification and risk management. So, compared to actively managed funds, which require that professional management by the fund manager, ETFs are typically passively managed and their fees are much lower, which is something you really need to be mindful of, obviously, because fees and charges are a part of investing. But if you can keep them as low as possible, what that means is that all the growth that you're experiencing as a result of investing isn't all eaten up in fees. So that's something you need to be really mindful of. Also, with ETFs is where, again, exchange traded funds is where you're getting a parcel of shares all in one. So you can invest in, for example, the ASX 200 or the S&P 500, which is the American one. And it's extremely, how can I say this? It's cheap, it's easy, it gives you diversification, you can add to it. It probably is the easier one to invest in prior to managed funds. The ETFs, they're really, really powerful. Now, I've spoken about REITs, which is real estate investment trusts. So if you want to invest 20 grand for the long term, you can pretty much invest in a REIT, because REITs provide regular income and they also have capital appreciation over the long term, obviously. And REITs are a definite great option. So REITs, what are they? Well, they can be shopping centres, building, offices, apartments, hotels, like the Westfields of the shopping centres, hotels. You've got the Hyatt, I think the Hyatt Regency. You've got the Sheraton. They're all a chain of REITs that you can get exposure to as a result of being invested in a REIT. And so it actually helps you get into the real estate market without the hassle of buying and managing physical properties. Obviously, for 20 grand, you can't get into a physical property, but you can access that asset class through investing in REITs. So that is definitely another way of looking at diversifying that 20 grand. REITs also, so they build passive income, they provide growth, they provide both, which is what we're looking for. And so they can be quite powerful. So in terms of real estate does offer great capital appreciation over the long term, but with $20,000, it's going to be pretty tough to get into the real estate market. You'd need a lot more. But if you're looking at a long-term view, long-term investment, direct property is definitely one of the powerhouses to be able to invest in. So talking about saving the 20 grand or coming into 20 grand, what are you going to do with that money? First question is to ask yourself, what's your first instinct tell you? And that will pretty much lead you back to your money story, which is what I always talk about. And I love bringing that up in each one of the discussions that I have, if I can link it back. And I can always link it back because my money story says to me, beauty, I've got some money, what can I spend it on? But I know that my money story is that, but that never served me. So ever since I did all the work in aligning my money behaviour with my values of today, it's changed my whole life. So I want you to stop, and I want you to think, and I want you to even compromise if you have to, even if you need a little bit for yourself to reward yourself for having saved it or come into some money. But at the end of the day, your future self will thank you. Think about, if it's short term, think about high yielding interest accounts, savings accounts, think about term deposits, park it, get it working for you. Interest rates are really high at the moment, so that's awesome. If you have a long-term view, really, it's pretty much a no-brainer to think about an ETF or to think about a managed fund. And ETFs also have the option to invest in REITs. So that's pretty much it. Make sure that if you are doing the long term, make sure you're adding to that investment every single month. That's the powerhouse behind that investment, and that's going to make a massive difference to the long-term result of getting that invested, staying invested, not pulling out when times get tough, not responding to market ups and downs, and focusing on that long term. And that's about it. So I hope you found that beneficial. I hope that's given you a little bit of insight into short term and long term. So make sure you subscribe now to our podcast on your favourite podcast platform. I look forward to sharing more and more of my pearls of wisdom with you. Simply subscribe, and thank you for joining me.